So, but I'm recording now. So we're recording.
So we're recording now?
Correct.
Okay, so calling the meeting to order. Hey, it's still 7:07. First thing on the agenda, approval of minutes from the February 24, 2021 ER9 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force regular meeting.
So moved.
Second, Cheryl.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none. Do I have to take a vote or just seeing no discussion? Chris,
You can assume it on unanimous consent if there's no objection.
I will assume it on unanimous consent if there's no objection. And then we have on the agenda, we have public comment, and it was suggested that we keep public comment at the end because we have students on the in the meeting who need to do their homework and go to bed early. So this was actually an error in the agenda, but is there a way that we can have a motion to move public comment just to the end?
This is a regular meeting, not a special meeting, correct?
Yeah.
Then we could entertain a motion to adjust the agenda. We could also time box it if we wanted to say we could allow for 10 minutes of public comment now, and then all overflow goes to the end.
Let's do that. Let's do that. So we'll have 10 minutes of public comment. If somebody would like to make a comment, please raise your hand in your little.
And that doesn't mean one person 10
No.
minutes, right?
No.
Right.
It's like 2 minutes, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. The first person we see is Bill Bardani.
Hi, Heather. Thank you. Bill Bardani, Soundview Drive in Easton. I think someone made the point on the last call last month that, we got to get good data from which to make decisions. And it's a point I couldn't agree with more. My limited understanding of survey design is that doing it the right way is much more of a science than it is an art. It's probably why most colleges offer courses on this. I think you want to make sure that the survey eliminates bias and ensures objectivity. It's not clear to me who drafted these questions. It wasn't clear to me from the last session. So I'd love to hear from the committee tonight on A, who drafted the questions, and B, what sort of expertise they have in writing survey questions and in doing it the right way. Certainly not my area of expertise, but if it's at all possible that significant change can flow from the results of the survey, then I want comfort that someone who knows what they're doing has been advised on this. Otherwise, in my opinion, I think it's going to be hard to take any results from this survey, any conclusions from this survey seriously. So again, in summary, just would love to hear from all of you on who exactly was involved in writing this and what their specific expertise is on survey design. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Let's see if anyone is waving.
A member of my household trying to log on and make a
Okay.
comment.
I'm going to lower Bill's hand. John, you said that someone was coming on for a public
Yeah,
comment.
Lisa's trying to get in. She says she's in the waiting room, but I don't know.
I don't see anybody. She may be on the other.
Yeah, she's probably in the other one.
All right.
This should be the link that was most recently noticed, right, to the public.
Is she going to slide in next to you?
That's
Cozy?
fine with me if you guys don't mind. There you go.
6 feet.
Hi, all.
Hi.
Hi. So
First, I need your name and your address.
Lisa Riley, 6 Drummer Lane, Reading. So after listening to public comments in previous committee meetings, I was disheartened at things I heard. But then upon reflection, I realized that this can be a space that will help educate people, especially people with forms of unintentional racism. In Daring Greatly, Brene Brown says that people are opting out of vital conversations about diversity and inclusivity because they fear looking wrong, saying something wrong, or being wronged. Choosing our own comfort over hard conversations is the epitome of privilege, and it corrodes trust and moves us away from meaningful and lasting change. So I think this is a great place to be able to have conversations or listen to everyone's point of view. I believe as the world we live in becomes increasingly diverse, we must engage our students in dialogue that may require them to lean into this discomfort. As an educator myself, and as educators here, we must create environments with experiences that help kids to get to a place of allowing for that vulnerability, enough to feel the discomfort so they can dive into issues that help create sustainable change. Also in public comment, I think it was the last meeting, graduates of Barlow High School expressed that their educational experience in Reading and Easton did not prepare them for understanding the racial inequities of the real world. They were dumbfounded when entering university and then blindsided again when beginning career opportunities. So what does this mean for ER9 in this committee? What does it mean for this committee and everyone in the educational system at ER9? I believe it means that we need to take a deep dive into the ER9 curriculum, K-12, and we need to ask, is there inclusion of all voices? Where in the ER9 curriculum are Black voices heard? Are we learning from Black historians, philosophers, biologists, engineers, mathematicians? Do we know this? Do we have this information at hand? K-5, for instance, how many read-alouds, how many picture books or novels are written in own voices, written by authors of colors? How many of those are students hearing each week or each month? Middle school. What does the summer book list look like, if there is one? I'm not even sure, or high school for that matter. What book titles are used where students are participating in conversation-rich book clubs around social issues, including all of the microaggressions that cause negative attitudes towards minority groups? Huge. These microaggressions are some of the things that I think some people who share comment at these committees are not understanding and that we need to look into. Are the questions being asked in these groups? Who has the power in this story or this book? Whose voice is heard? Whose voice is missing or eliminated? Are these the kinds of questions that are being asked of students? High school, what history titles and a curriculum exist that still carry untruths about how our nation came to be? What's still out there? I mean, are we investigating? Are we looking into this? What access do students of colors have on their ancestry and history before the time of slavery? Do they have access to that? Every child, no matter the color of their skin, has hopes and desires, and we have a responsibility to help create a path where all children's desires can be realized. And I think the first place is to be looking at what our curriculum holds or does not. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment up front? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on. Now, I had asked the staff representatives to prepare, or not prepare, but just to give us a couple of comments on the things that are happening in the school. I remember at our last meeting, there was some level of perhaps frustration at the slow pace of this, that we don't want to be waiting for these surveys, and that's not the only thing that we're doing. And it was mentioned that there is stuff that's happening in the schools already. And so I'm going to start with Kelly Blessy, who is our, to put you on the spot, who is our representative from Reading Elementary School, to give us a little snapshot. And I know Dana, where's Dana? Yes, there you are. Dana's going to tell us a little bit about what's happening. Is it at Helen Keller, right? And then Rebecca also is going to talk to us about what's happening at Barlow. And then I don't know if Darlene, if you wanted to, yes, Darlene's good to go. All right, take it away.
So I can just speak extemporaneously, or I can share with you a sample of the work that is done. That'll be up to you.
Well, you want me to make you a host so you can share your?
I can. I'll try to go really fast through it. And I'll share while you're changing my sharing privileges. So recently, the elementary school, Reading Elementary School, celebrated Read Across America Week, and we worked to create a resource for staff that coincides with the National Education Association's new theme, which has changed in recent years. And so the focus is really on diversity and reading diversity. So the slideshow encompasses a whole weekly theme, but also a daily theme. We offered staff members and students a great variety of texts, both digital and in print. We offered them resources that extend beyond text. And I know we were just meant to share a tidbit of it, but to tell you a little bit, there is art and music incorporated. There were absolutely evidence of books written in own voices. There were books about empathy, compassion, inclusiveness, activism. We had pre-K students involved in reading, discussing, looking at the work of Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop and her work with windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. We had text analysis.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I like, this is a point of order thing. I believe the noticed meeting was noticed to start at 7:30.
There are multiple agendas, one of which is 7, one of which is 7:30.
Do we? I am so sorry to stop you, Kelly. Like
that is just for next time, and I'll show it to you.
The agenda that was sent out was then revised.
Okay.
So
I just want to make sure, like, if the latest one that was sent out has this link on it, good. If it says it started at 7, then we're good. I don't want there to be any room for confusion or for somebody to say there's shenanigans.
The one that I have that says it started at 7 is this link.
Okay.
It should have been reposted. I believe that it was reposted to all of the relevant sites.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our permanent calendar lists the meetings always starting at 7. I apologize to anybody who's coming in confusing. Everybody had 2 different Zoom links. If you're just joining us, you've missed 2 public comments, and now we're talking about some things that are happening at RES.
I'm just checking the town website.
Oh.
I'm just checking the town website to make sure that the latest one posted.
It is not posted by the Reading Town Clerk, but it is on the ER9 website as 7 p.m. The agenda circulated to members said 7:30.
Right. So it was just the agenda that was circulated to members had the wrong thing.
Provided that the updated agenda was posted more than 24 hours ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it was corrected pretty quickly. The only confusion was the link that was on our email.
Right.
For the task force members, but members of the public who would have gotten
the link from the agenda that was publicly posted. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I did like.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. We will not, hopefully to not make these
agreed.
Mistakes again.
No,
okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
Kelly, I'm super sorry. Kelly, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. I'll do that real quick and I'll try and breeze through it. So this is just an example of behind the scenes. This is how the slideshow begins. This is offered to teachers as a resource. You'll see multiple texts alongside. These are suggested texts along with the NEA suggested text as well. There's video and music resources. There's art activities to coincide with the day's theme. And then you'll see that up at the top, there's an audio sample of a song that was written by a previous 4th grade class of students with words that also coincide with the theme. So for each of the 5 days, you'll see lots of different resources and activities for children of all ages to participate in. And then I'll just show you what it looks like when it's presented to students. This is what the students would likely have up on the screen for the day. And then from here, there were other read-worthy ideas offered to teachers. There were teachers who invited parents to read via Zoom during the week. I know that many of our administrators were in attendance via Zoom as well. There's additional resources, and at the bottom, there's also some research available to teachers so that they could better understand what was perhaps to some a little bit of a transition from what they were used to celebrating during that Read Across America week. So I thought you might like to take a peek at our week, and just so you can see some examples of students actually participating. This was our big idea when the 3 core creators of this week's theme and activities, we put it together, that little kids can learn big things. It's all about how you scaffold it for the students and how you structure their learning to support their ability to conceptualize those big ideas. So that's a little bit of a sing along with some of the songs. Here is Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop and different examples of some of the work that was done in the 1st grade level, at a 2nd grade level. And then there are some self-portraits, so you see the extension of the reading. And throughout all of this, students were reading and discussing text. And really looking at it in different levels. You'll see this is a parent reading text to her students' class in her native language. There's multiple variations of genres that we use to enhance the text as well. I'm trying to breeze through it so very quickly, but this is just a love to see. This is a preschool class sharing their activism. I know you might not be able to hear, they're saying, please wear masks, please wear masks. And then just to close, some teacher feedback. How exciting it was for everybody to teach in this integrated fashion with these big ideas for our little learners.
Thank you so much. Beatrix, did you have a question? I see your hand is up.
Hold on. No, I just wanted to say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say my daughter is in Miss Bussey's class, and that was a powerful week for me. I'll actually even put the video on so you all can see me. I usually hide away from the video, but I will tell you that I told you guys from the beginning, my interest is in seeing that whatever is put together is delivered in a way that upholds and honors and esteems my children. And my kids are doing distance learning until after spring break, and then I'm just going to roll them into the schools and drive off. But my daughter sits in the office next to me, and I get to hear what's happening. And it was such a powerful week for me as a parent, and I'm emotional. I was so grateful for it, and the conversations that took place in my home with my kids were mind-blowing. And I couldn't have asked for anything better. It was so inclusive, without being sugary and coding. And thank you. That's all I can say. I get to listen when I'm here in classes. I get to listen to what's happening in the class. And if this is what my kids will experience in Reading schools, then I'm glad to be a part of this community. So thank you.
Thank you.
The camera goes off now.
Okay, not to put too much pressure. Dana, do you want to tell us what's been going on at Helen Keller?
Yeah, right. She has a nice presentation, everything. I teach middle school, so it's a little bit different. So I've had the privilege of attending, unfortunately one's canceled, so I still have one more to go. But at CES, they offered an online LGBTQ plus workshop with Seth Wallace. He runs the whole program at Yale University. And it's really just a question and answer, and him just really answering our local schools questions. And it's been really insightful. I know Annie's already reached out to him to start thinking of how we can bring some things into the middle school. But the big takeaways, I'm not going to go into crazy detail, but they talked about 3 levels of change, and that we need to change. People need to change as an individual, but we also need to change in small groups like this. And then at the whole institutional level. So if we don't change in all different areas, one necessarily isn't enough. And then it has to be in stages. And they talked about, we are in a tech world, and this year proves it more than anything, and how that's really changed things for the LGBTQ community, and that they can see kids that are more like them and are more accepting and have these group chats. And you can look up a video about hormonal changes and things, but that to be careful that we're giving them information as well, because we know the information on the internet is not always accurate. And then we talked about terms to avoid and terms that were okay, which I thought was really interesting because we started our community with that kind of conversation in terms. They talked about, using terms like the community. If you don't know LGBTQ plus, don't try and ramble letters because it makes it worse. It's not supportive. When in doubt, say the community. Seems to be an encompassing term, and ask those questions. What's the best term to use? Especially at the middle school, the biggest takeaway was ask these students, how do you want to be introduced to your class? Do you want to be introduced a certain way? Or do you want to just call you the pronoun that you associate with and just go about our day? And really start having these conversations with students. Another thing was, as we get into the mental health, that we're seeing a ton throughout every district, when and if there's a need for DCF referrals, to make sure. I thought this was interesting that we were asking questions about, are you being accepted in your household and being used the correct terms and pronouns, or do you feel threatened in that way, which I'd never thought of. I guess they're seeing a lot of suicidal tendencies and things happening. What else? I'm just going through my notes. And they talked about a lot of resources, which I can put in the chat too. There's a brand new Netflix documentary called Disclosure that is really powerful, and a bunch of books that are really helpful for parents, especially if parents don't know where to start. And they talked about normalizing. And I loved the elementary, because we were just talking about how it's never too young to start talking about this. And one school was talking about, they do a whole project where they take like your fables, like a Cinderella, and switch genders and see what that story would look like and allow kids to tell it in their gender. And so they talked about how there's tons out there, and it doesn't have to be intense in the elementary school, but we're seeing more and more students transition at a younger age with the knowledge and internet and all, seeing other students like them. So overall, it's just really been interesting and great to listen to so far. But I have tons of books and resources. And they talked about detransition. I'd never heard really much about, and that sometimes students transition and then transition back, and that they shouldn't be referred to as making mistakes, and that it's okay, and that a student may fluctuate back and forth between genders while they're trying to figure out themselves, and that it shouldn't be, oh, they don't know what they are, or they're just, they're friends. That's a very big thing that they're seeing, and we need to know that term. So that was basically what I had.
That's awesome. If you want to,
not as fancy, I'm sorry.
If you want to send those resources,
Yeah.
are there, you can email them to me, and then I can make sure everybody gets them.
Perfect.
And then let's move on to Darlene. Do you want to talk about what's been going on at John Reed?
Sure. So we have, myself and a few teachers are also going to the same workshop that Dana just talked about. So yes, some of that has been happening at John Reed. I don't need to go through that part. 2 weeks ago, we had a group from Welcoming Schools did some PD for us. Prior to them coming, talking to us via Zoom, the staff had to complete a survey, and it really is about the LGBTQ community. We had to complete a survey so that they knew our starting point. Then they gave us work to do. We had to do some readings and take some quizzes just so that they could get a better sense of our understanding of the LGBTQ community. And we had a 2-hour workshop, and it was really, our teachers asked good questions. You could tell that they had thought about it because of all the work that they had done ahead of time, including things like using the masculine and feminine words in Spanish, because every noun has it's either masculine or feminine. So the Spanish teachers are asking, well, what do we do? So good conversations there. I don't have my whole list in front of me, but I also know Maria Frederick as our library media specialist. She was offering some book groups by diverse authors. So there were some about authors of color, and I read both the 2 books that she had selected. And it was interesting because you're coming at things from a different.
Uh-oh, you're mute.
Oh, I don't know
Yeah,
why.
there you are. Wait,
Okay.
yeah.
So, but just on diverse authors, so celebrating them so that students get a different perspective.
Isn't there a new club at John Reed also that was organized by students?
Yes, the Rainbow Alliance Club, which is great. They have a very good turnout every week, and they get together and just talk. It's a safe place to talk. So
That's awesome. And that was like a grassroots thing that the students organized themselves, right?
well, the students were interested in it and talked to some of the teachers and got a few staff members who are willing to be the moderators for the group.
Awesome.
Yeah, lots going on at John Reed.
Thank you. Okay, Rebecca.
Hi. At Barlow, I know we've had multiple professional developments about DEI. We had one in the beginning of the year, one I think in January, and that one was similar kind of to what we did in the first meeting and going over vocabulary and stuff. I know we have another one coming up 2 weeks, I think, before spring break about DEI again. So I'm excited to see what they talk about there. And we actually had a professional develop today talking about mental health, which is also very important about our students and for the staff, which is important to learn about. Barlow also has their own DEI committee. It's the advisory committee, it's called, and I know they've been working with consultants from Connecticut School of Change organizations, and they have a lot of people on that as well. They have parents, teachers, students, support staff, administrators, and on the committee. Yeah.
Great. All right. So thank you guys for that. So moving on, discussion of possible action, the surveys. So everybody was sent around the new drafts of the surveys. They were cleared by the attorneys with some things that we have to make sure that we adhere to. And I don't know if those of you who were here last week, there was some concern on the middle school survey, particularly the question regarding sexual orientation and whether that was a can of worms that some kids might not be ready to address. And so what we did was, first of all, we decided to keep the middle school survey to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, not include the 5th graders. And then on that question, you will see, I mean, I don't know if I need to share my screen or not. It's, I can. Should I share my screen so you see the change? Yeah, okay. Okay, that's not it. This is it. Okay, so this is the middle school survey. One of the things is that we had to take out the part where somebody had the option to leave their name. So that's all been removed from all of the surveys. So this is totally anonymous. And then the gender stays the same, and then sexual orientation for middle school for 6th, 7th, and 8th, we kept the options. Below is a list of terms that people often use to describe their sexuality or sexual orientation. Please check all those terms that apply to you. And then we kept it as straight, heterosexual, LGBTQ+, questioning, not sure, I'm not familiar, I choose not to answer. Now, right at the front, I have to say that one thing that the attorney said is that parents will have the option to opt out. I mean, it's all going to be opt-in, but parents will have the ability to opt out on behalf of their kids. So if there are parents who don't want their kids answering this survey, their kids won't answer the survey. If that makes sense.
Is that at every age level?
Yep, that's at every age level. I mean, it has its. I guess it's we legally are required to do that. I think, you know, there's a lot of drawbacks to that, particularly in what Dana was talking about, kids who might not feel safe at home, which is a horrible thing to think about. but that's what the attorneys advised. Also, if there's any instructional material that's going to be handed out ahead of these surveys, that also has to be shown to the parents, and I don't think that there will be. So, Stephanie, can you think of anything else that they said?
Parents have the right to inspect the survey before making a decision whether they wish for their child to participate. You talked about the instructional materials. That might be as simple as if there's some type of introductory statement, the teachers will be providing sort of not even a mini lesson, but some type of an introduction to the group before they have the option of completing the survey, that parents would be aware of that information as well. So parents will really have very complete information and will be able to make an informed decision about their child's participation, and certainly any student will have the right to decide not to participate once the survey is presented.
The parental permission, Stephanie and Heather, does that apply to even students at Barlow who are 18?
You know, the guidance that we received from the attorney really just had to do with the law that protects students in general, students in our school system. There was no age marker on it. And because of the content in the survey, there's very specific guidance and protections in place for students. So I can go back and double check that, Cheryl, but I don't believe that I saw an age marker.
I don't think it's necessary. I'm just curious as to whether or not the legal adult age mattered or not. Okay, thanks.
If they're legally an adult, it's got to be their choice.
That's, yeah.
It has nothing, right? It would be shocking to me that legally we'd be in any kind of trouble for giving an 18-year-old the opportunity to make the decision for themselves.
I don't know. I think we want to comply with what the, you know.
I don't know that they were necessarily thinking of that.
We can double check that.
Can I suggest that we focus on the content of the survey, because this is going to have to go to the boards before it gets issued anyway, and the boards are going to have the same questions, so we can be prepared to answer those at that level.
Was there any other comment that people had on the content of the surveys?
I have a question about I was looking at the parent survey. Some of the questions, it's asking a good parent opinion, like my student's school or encourages students to care about how others feel, or there are some, similar questions. If a parent doesn't know, are we assuming then they choose neutral, or should there be some kind of a, like I don't know or not sure, something, a different way for parents to respond? Because I don't know if we want a neutral if it's just because they're not sure.
So you're suggesting instead of saying neutral, say neutral/not sure.
I'm wondering.
It's a typical, in a Lagert scale like this, it's typical to offer an option for not observed.
Okay.
Right? Or unable to assess, like that kind of thing.
Kelly, bless you.
Thanks. So I had a question about number 14 on the middle school and high school survey, and then it was 13 on the staff. And while you're looking at that one, thank you, everybody. This was more than tremendous work. It's so impressive that you were able to put all of this information together in such a cohesive and with such synthesis. So thank you. So it was one in which the question used the pronoun there, but then so it was almost asking about other people, but then the answers used the word your, which made me feel like I was supposed to be answering about myself.
Okay. Is it the one that I'm looking at here? Question 13, you said?
Yeah. So you have the behind the scenes look. The introductory question says something about, have you seen evidence of this in their school or something like that? And then
I think it should be I think you're right, Kelly. It's screen 14 under the change in frequency of incidents. Is that the header you see?
So yeah, I just saw where, hold on. Oh, I see, 13. Is it 13 or 14 you said? 14.
No, it's
14 on
screen 14. Is it
So
this one?
as of there, but then the answers say your.
Ah, there, I see.
But actually, it's about the of students though, right? So it should be there, I think.
That's what I was thinking too, but I wasn't sure if I was misreading it.
And it's not clear. Yeah, maybe we should make it more clear.
So, okay, so on the student surveys, number 14, it should be there instead of your in the answer.
And this is a different setup for the Likert.
Yeah.
So I'm just, so like, do we want to have the sort of, I don't know, is that actually the right way to pose the other sort of where we were talking about the I don't know answer on the other Likert?
Yeah, I think we can make that uniform across the surveys where it can say neutral or not observed or so that it's uniform.
Okay.
So Heather, so for the discussion that we were having before this question, I think it's good for us to have the neutral option, but then add a point for I don't know.
Right.
And I think I don't know is a better choice than not observed.
Okay.
Because if parents or students or whoever is indicating that they don't know, that's also an opportunity for us to be able to say, well, if people don't know these things, then that's something that we can focus on.
Also, not observed sort of implies like, well, it's probably happening, but I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
And that was also on number, I think it was page 13 or number 13. I don't know if I'm using the number correctly for the staff survey. It was the same issue there in your. And then I had a question as I was rereading, and it took me a couple of reads to come to this aha. I'm wondering where our linguistically diverse students fit, those who have one language under their belt and are working to acquire a second or even third language. Where do they fit in within the realm of mistreatment? I saw something reflecting citizenship status, and I think that might be the closest piece that I saw connecting to possible mistreatment for their linguistic diversity, and was wondering if that might be something we want to include somewhere.
I think that's a really, really good. What would it be like? I mean, how would you phrase that for a middle school? I'm sure there's a survey, a source that we could look at that would
be a good resource for that. She might have firsthand knowledge. I don't want to put her on the spot, but just some things that kids say, people who speak differently, who have an accent, people who don't maybe have all the same vocabulary, if they're mistreated because of their speech specific to their linguistic acquisition. I know those words aren't going to go on the kids survey.
Right. It's like it's specifically because of what your native language is.
Yeah, or because we often call that we used to refer to, we call them English learners, and so maybe that might be a term.
Yep. Or
would you put it under the uncomfortable incidents, that section, which is section 11?
I would think it would go under that the section where we listed
that you're mistreated or somebody has been.
Yeah.
But if we're asking students this, couldn't we simply just make it as either because you speak a foreign language or you speak with an accent?
Or your native language, just your native language.
You could just say a language other than English.
Yeah.
Yeah, but B, I like the way that you said it for.
We speak 5 languages in my house. I know this. I know this well. So how you not just that you speak a foreign language, and also how you sound speaking English. Those are the things that people will get teased about.
Okay, so we'll include that. We'll add the neutral / I don't know option for all of those. The student surveys, we have to correct on number 14 and number 13 on the staff, so that the there and your is all there, and then include native language speakers. Was there anything else?
Heather, I had one. Oh, sorry. Are you still going, Kale? Sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna
Oh,
say. I
you're
think
good. Keep going.
typo on one of the questions. That was it. I
Wait,
think
what's the typo?
on the staff survey,
Okay.
page 6, I think it was meant to be multiple. At the very bottom of that
Why
page
is
6.
it not going back? It's not even. Okay, I can find it. We don't need to hold up the meeting for this. It was on number 6, you said?
Yeah.
What was it?
So when I was looking at the survey, I look at it as a survey taker, and it was page 6 is how it comes up. And it was multiple disabilities, I think was what it was supposed to say.
Multiple?
At the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Ooh. Ah. All right, I'll fix that because now I'm looking at it in the wrong way. So that's number. Thank you. All right, anything else?
I had one. I was on the staff survey, but I don't know. I would probably email and check in with the, but being in the LGBTQ workshop, they talked a lot about how they were using terms like trans and cis without the gender because it's not about gender anymore. So a lot of times they're referring as trans instead of transgender. So we may just want to look at that term. It was brought up a few times. So I can email the head at Yale and ask him his thoughts, but it came up a few times.
Okay, so instead of on that question, it would, instead of saying transgender, you would say trans?
Just trans. Same thing with cis. Instead of cisgender, they're just.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So if you could get clarification on that.
Yep, I'll email him.
Anything else?
Heather, I was just wondering, so I know a lot of the questions, there is a similarity to the school climate questions. So there is going to be a lot of overlap, but yet there are also differences. So I'm just trying to figure out how it's all going to fit in.
Yeah, the questions that were included from the climate survey were so that we could cross-reference them. In like, even though somebody might have answered that, we won't have that answer to correspond to the survey taker of this survey. And I think they're trying to get different information from each of those. Even some of it's the same, but it's a little different. And you want to be able to have those. I think if anyone tried to take it, I think it's less than 10 minutes you can answer this, unless you want to have the option to write longer things. Want to answer the question that Bill had at the beginning. I don't know if you're still on here. At the last meeting, I shared the source material for where these survey questions came from. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I'm happy to send that to you. And then we do have people who do this for a living who are on this task force and are advising us. And then also the schools are used to interpreting survey data. Also, this is not going to be just a group of parents trying to figure this out. We're creating the survey for the schools to use. Right? Okay, anything else? Did any of the board members have concerns or, because you're gonna have to bring this back to your boards.
Heather, I just want to be sure, did you mention that you're pulling off the last statement that provides an opportunity for the survey taker to list the name?
Yes, yeah, that's taken off of all of them. And it's taken off from the beginning also in the introduction that says that you will have the option. We won't know who is answering it.
In lieu of that option at the end, does it make sense to have some sort of a comment that is specific to the survey that says, if you have concerns and want to talk to somebody, reach out to and a contact?
That's good. That's good. And then who should the contact be?
I think it would depend on the survey.
Would it be like your school counselor, or?
If you're a
We can
student,
discuss
is that right?
We can discuss that for each, that would be different for each school, right?
Looks like Dr. Harrison might have a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think the school principal is the right place to start.
Okay.
And then from there, let the principal divert to whoever, I mean, if it's a student, it would obviously, it might make sense to send them to the counselor, or if it's a parent, I think that the principal would be the appropriate person.
Okay.
Just briefly, before we get too far away from the question about some of the duplicative questions, I think it's less about the sort of longitudinal sort of qualities of that in terms of getting sort of multiple results back, because we won't be able to correlate those. It's being able to correlate those questions specifically to the other questions we're asking, which is immensely valuable. So I think it's actually a really good thing that we're repeating some of the questions.
Yeah, that was, Beatrix gave me a whole lesson on that. Okay, are there any other thoughts or concerns? So keeping in mind that these are still drafts, and I have the notes that were and we can incorporate these before we take them to the boards. Can the voting board members approve these surveys to be taken to their respective boards? How do we vote on that here?
You're looking for a motion to recommend to the 3 boards of education that they approve the currently draft Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Task Force surveys to be distributed to staff, parents, and students of all 5 schools, subject to the revisions that we've authorized the chair to make.
3 schools.
3 schools.
Yeah. Are you making that motion, Chris?
I think I just did.
Okay.
Did you write it all down?
No. Did you write it down? I will write it down because I'm going to have to go back and watch this.
Recording.
So, okay. So who seconded?
I did.
Who, John?
Conrad, yeah.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. So I guess I have to go around? So do we vote individually as boards or just as a?
I think we're a joint committee, so you can call on any.
Okay. Cheryl?
Yes.
Devin?
Yeah.
Chris Parkin?
Yes.
John Stinson?
Yes.
Frozen. We'll skip him for a second. John Riley?
Yes.
And then who else is on here? Is Gretchen? Is Gretchen on?
No, she had to go at 7:30, I think.
Okay, and then Juliet, is she on? And Todd is not on. So what does
You
that
can go
mean?
back to John.
John Stinson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what is our quorum here for?
Of the members present and voting?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so hearing no objections, that motion carries.
You have to vote too, Heather.
Oh, we have to vote.
You have to
Oh,
vote.
I vote yes. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, moving on. Thank you, everybody. And I want to give a huge shout out once again to Natasha, who was so helpful in doing all of this. She's a student at John Reed, and to Devin, to Beatrix, and Susan, and it was really fun. And I'm going to ask other people to sign up for a working group a little later on. So I can't recommend it enough. Okay, so moving on, ways for the task force to engage the community. Now, one of the things, obviously, that we've seen is a lot of interest from the community that we've seen in our public comments. And I think it was brought up at the beginning that this is a good forum to have these sort of conversations that are important to have. And as we've heard from students and from other members of the community, are deeply necessary to have. So we wanted to just take, 10 minutes to talk about ways we might engage the community. And one idea, I'm going to share my screen again, sorry. One idea is from, not that one, the CABE, which is the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. Okay. And they suggest forming a committee like this one involving members of the community, and then holding listening sessions, basically talking sessions. And they have all kinds of guidance for them in their equity toolkit, which I can send everybody a link to that. It's also on the er9.org website under diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can see this whole presentation here. I'm just going to show you their sort of guide for leading these kind of conversations. Obviously, we would be doing this over Zoom, and it would be more of a less of a meeting where somebody makes a comment and you can't really respond to it. And it's really a way to listen to each other. And they have possible questions that you can ask, a structure of organizing this. And here they have a whole thing about serving everybody a light supper. We probably will skip the light supper, although you can have your own snacks, I suppose. And then they have they have like guidelines and rules. So it's all very organized and laid out, which to me that sounds like something that would be a good thing for this group to get involved in, if it was like smaller group discussions, and then we could have like different groups of us facilitating these conversations, these small conversation listening sessions, and then come back and report what was discussed. That's one idea, and I would love to hear ideas from the group. Devin.
I love that idea, so thank you for sharing that. I think it's great. I do also think, just from the school side, just hearing, I know when we rolled out the new math curriculum years ago, and I know as we're getting ready for the new math curriculum, there's going to be some parent information sessions. I think similar parent information sessions, especially for different grade levels. Like, it was so helpful to hear from the different teachers around what's happening in kindergarten, or the younger kids in the middle school. So you can see and hear and really see examples of differences. So like, what does DEI look like? What does SEL look like? Different grade levels. And then also when the survey results come back, instead of just shooting out an email, like, how are we going to present that information and talk about that information and connect it to the work? So just, I think more community engagement would be really helpful.
Yeah, I know we have Phyllis Rhodes is on. She's with the League of Women Voters. And I know that there are other groups. The Mark Twain Library is doing, and in Easton, there's groups that are also doing this kind of work that I would love to hear, like hi Phyllis, ideas that you might have of ways that we could involve other groups and stakeholders in the community in this work also.
Certainly, we would be happy to have a conversation about, pushing out something to the League membership. If you guys wanted to do some kind of a community event, it's so complicated with COVID right now. We've been doing everything online. We have, reading series. We have a speaker series going on right now. We've had some really great speakers. We had the last one had Jelani Cobb and Jason Stanley speaking at it. It was moderated by a female reporter from the New York Times. So we have a lot going on right now, and certainly I think I can speak for the group in saying that we would be more than happy to help you guys, in whatever it is you'd like to do.
One thing that might be a good discussion to have is what the League might and other groups might want to do in the schools in terms of, you know, like assemblies, speakers, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I don't want to. I'm looking at Doctors Pearson, Ugal, and Harrison. Like, I don't want to be like scheduling stuff that it's not my job to do that. But
No, but there is precedent. I mean, we did actually have Charles Dew, who is the author of, he's a professor at Williams College and the author of a book called The Making of a Racist. And it's sort of an autobiographical historical study. And he came to Barlow, gosh, I guess it was last year in the fall. So not this past fall, but the fall before, and spoke. I wasn't involved in the planning with Barlow, so correct me if I'm wrong, those of you who are on this call who might have been involved, but I believe he spoke at an assembly and also to the history classes or something. So again, you know, we're more than happy to facilitate, you know, if you guys let us know what what you're interested in having, we're more than happy to help you facilitate those things.
All right.
Heather, were you looking at this as how to engage the task force in the community or how to engage the community in DEI work?
Both.
Okay.
So I want this very engaged group who is eager and excited to get to work on these issues, to get to work on these issues. And I think that from what I've just observed in these meetings and then in some of the things that I'm seeing outside of the meetings, but what's being discussed about, you know, the whole fact that we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the community. And I think that listening to each other is really important. And I know that it's super easy to jump onto a meeting and make a public comment at the beginning and not listen to what's being discussed. And that doesn't get anywhere. That doesn't help anybody. And it also doesn't help anybody if I hear your public comment and we can't engage in a conversation to let you know, I'm listening to you, I hear you. I might disagree with you, but I hear you and I hear your concerns. So I think that's what I'm talking about.
I think, Heather, in the context of building awareness of, support for, and actually engaging in DEI work in the school community, there's sort of two things that come to mind. The first is obviously to leverage the PTAs and PTOs, who I think are ready, willing, and able to engage time and even funding to make a lot of these programs work. And secondly, something that I know that John Stinson and Dr. Harrison and I have been kind of talking about with increasing frequency recently is that when we come back to whatever the normal is going to be, that we have a rare opportunity to rebuild whatever communities and traditions we want to exist in our schools. And this sort of is a piece of that, and how we overlay this and use this as a lens through which we are building those new traditions, both, and I'm thinking particularly at John Reed Middle School, where we'll have new leadership, as well as all of our buildings where the students, many of them will have no concept of what a full normal year is like in that building.
I'm wondering if our student representatives could ask around and say, like, what is it that you would like to see, you know, happening in your schools?
One quick thing of note, and I not to sign Dr. Harrison up for more work, but he's remarkable at engaging in conversations with a very broad audience and really, you know, cutting through all the buzzwords and all that, and just getting to that sort of listening and hearing and learning. And so, you know, if we have the opportunity to have community sessions, if we're going to be sort of sponsoring that, Dr. Harrison is very capable in those conversations, leading those. Not to put you on the spot, but
not to make him go to like.
Oh, thanks, John.
I mean, you don't know how many people.
You know, I mean, there's work that I end up having to do that I'm like, oh God, this would be work that I would really enjoy. So I appreciate you volunteering me for it. Yeah, I mean, I think that there could be a really natural opportunity to for me to be a part of these sessions, and then kind of have, you know, build on that and have some you know, kind of regular discussion groups. one of the things that that I've been working on, and I'm right on the cusp of finishing up, is to create a DEI website. So if I could just take a moment and just share my screen and give a preview of what that looks like. And part of that is to be able to better answer the question when we're talking about DEI. What do you mean? Because absent, without having a clear sort of definition and a clear direction of what we're talking about, we unfortunately are allowing sort of our story to be told. And so I would like to see have this site link off of our site. And so, you know, just connecting, you know, what do we mean by DEI? I thought that the way we started tonight's meeting with, here are some highlights of things that are happening, I would like to feature those here. And so you'll see, I've reached out to principals and said, hey, I'm working on this site. Give me a couple of bullet points about things that are happening at your school. This site would have been 5 pages long if I included everything, which is a good thing, because that means that there are a lot of very natural things that are happening, you know, to the point of you know, things that we heard from our staff tonight, but even things that it's harder to capture in a bullet point, like you know, we've done some real good work around with our classroom libraries, and so I got to be one of the readers for the programs that we were talking about earlier at RES and also at John Reed. And I was so excited about my book at RES that I was going to introduce these kindergartners to this book about a student of color. And I was so proud of it. And the teacher was like, oh, we have that on our shelf. We just haven't read it this year. And I was, you know, and so I was happy to hear that, but that's not something that I don't think that everyone would notice, especially this year, given that there are, we're not having people in classrooms like we normally would to be able to display that. And so I felt like this is just a very natural way to capture some of those things. And then an opportunity here to specifically talk about the DEI Task Force, which I think what I want to promote on this site is that the work of DEI is the work of the district. The DEI Task Force is giving us guidance, and we appreciate that, but this is not the only place where this work is happening. And I think that that's important. And so just some information there about the charge and the framework, the meeting schedule. And then this piece here, just going back to all that DEI vocabulary that we talked about in the first meeting, where you could just kind of click on what some of these terms mean. And so, you know, I mean, this is all low tech. This is me over the weekend on Google Sites, but I feel like it's a good start. And one of the pieces that I know we'll talk about in tonight's agenda that to me would be sort of right here at the top would be, boom, here's our equity statement. And this is what grounds all of the work in what we do. And you know, going forward, I think it could be just a really nice opportunity to showcase that this is more than just lip service, but it's really representative of a deep commitment to the work, and also a recognition that this doesn't mean that we fixed it, right? That we, you know, we have arrived and we are now diverse, equitable, and inclusive 100%. But it really gives us a picture, gives a picture to the community of how we're progressing along the continuum.
Okay, Beatrix, do you have your hand up?
I did. So one of the questions that has been going through my mind throughout this process as we've been designing the survey, and even now as I was reading Dr. Harrison's screen in terms of the definition, the very first sentence, I think it was something about combating bias and things like that. So a lot, you know, as we were putting the surveys together, we looked at how a lot of other schools did it, did their own research. We used some of their questionnaires. We used a lot of resources. The thing that stood at the back of my mind was that constantly what I saw was a flow of information in one direction. which is we've identified a problem and this is what we're going to do for the problem. What I haven't seen, and this is why I'm glad to hear the conversation about this conversation about having different conversations with the community. What I haven't seen is where those people who this is supposed to be benefiting, what is their feedback in terms of how it's working? And I think that needs to be a critical part of the conversation, because you can do a lot, you can pour millions into this, but at the end of the day, if those people who fall in these different groups don't see a change, then what's it all for? So I think there needs to be a some kind of a dialogue, some kind of a group in whatever capacity. Again, I'm from the corporate world, so I'm just throwing this out there, where we're assessing. I mean, how do you really assess if this is being successful? At the end of the day, right? Someone mentioned earlier that there's like different levels of change that happen. If a teacher can technically do everything, but if their heart isn't in it, there's not going to be classroom justice. When the opportunity presents itself. How do we know whether the needle is actually being moved by the actions that are being taken, and which actions are succeeding, which ones are making it a welcome community, and which ones are not working? So to me, as I looked at this, and I was like, this is great, but at the end of the day, if we're not talking to people and saying, how is this going on? It's kind of a moot point.
To B's point, I would just extend it to make mention of the fact that the experience of a teacher is like no other this year. And in looking to do this work, I would hope that we would also look to support teachers to grow in their understanding of this work in the same way we're hoping for community members to be able to grow in their understanding of this work. It's a process for everyone, and each one of us, be it staff member, student, community member, etc., is beginning at a different point, and each point is an important beginning point, but they're in all different places. So that conversation that we seem to recognize as a group to be incredibly important for growth also needs to be afforded to staff members so that they can in turn grow as well.
Do you think that staff members would participate in like a mixed group where it's like some people in the community, maybe some students, parents, and staff members, or would staff members want to have their own conversations?
Yes, they
Their
would.
own, right.
Yes.
Okay.
First, I think you would find some staff members ready and willing to participate in a more diverse group of participants, being from different portions of the community.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I think that the learning needs to take place at individual schools at their developmental level of instruction. I think that would be most appropriate and the area in which we'd see the most participation and growth.
And then perhaps after that, they might want to participate again in another more broad discussion. Beatrix.
Okay, so I get that, but as a parent, here's my point from a parent. And I'm blessed to not have been experienced this in my time here, my 1.5 years here. But if it happens down the road, it's like if I'm perceiving a conflict of sorts happening in my child's class, or if my child is perceiving a conflict, but the teacher is not understanding where we're seeing the conflict, where does that go? There has to be a place, and I don't mean, there has to be a safe space created where we can, for translation of perceived slights. And because without that feedback, how does a teacher grow? And without that conversation, how do we then address these things without the teacher, because it has to be done in a way with whoever's leading that classroom is not made to feel attacked or judged, because I'm not interested in attacking or judging. I'm interested in changing. right? So yes, there's a place to have it on the whole side. I'm not a teacher, but as a parent, this is where I think, you know, this survey, I think, is going to show some big gaps, right? And in terms of experiences. So when I look at this, like, where do you take that if there isn't a safe space for, and I don't want to call it conflict resolution, I want to call it for language translation. Why I see this and why my child sees this one way and why you see this another and why it's important to me. And this isn't just about, oh, he didn't do his homework. I'm talking cultural, unbiased issues where it's subject to interpretation based on your own personal experiences. Isn't this what we're talking about? So there has to be a conversation that happens, and it has to be done in a way where you're not crucifying a teacher, but instead you're creating a safe space for the parent and the teacher to really not hash it out because that's confrontational, but to really sort of understand each other's language.
I'm wondering if that's the kind of a conversation that, you know, when we talk about having these listening sessions, we have administrators and staff members in this task force that can be part, I'm just assuming would be part of those broader community conversations, and then would have the ability to take some of that information back to the staff. I don't know.
This is difficult work.
So Beatrix, it's interesting because that was actually almost like a half of my workshop this past Thursday, in about the role of administration in being supportive yet involved in those uncomfortable conversations for both parties, right, and how there has to be, that's why there has to be the 3 levels, and a teacher has to say, listen, this makes, like, I'm uncomfortable, I need help, without feeling like both ends, and that it's got to start at that top level, and that I could walk in, which I could, into Sue's office and say, this is going on, I don't really know what to do, like, I just need support. And same thing with parents. So it was just interesting. We spent a lot of time talking about that and the need for it.
It's extremely uncomfortable work. And I think we need, like, there needs to be the creation of some type of body that provides a safe space for this type of growth.
I'm not suggesting another position, but I will say that I just ended a webinar earlier today on fostering racial literacy with children's literature, and bigger districts have a coordinator for DEI, and they structure the work of their educators and support community growth, as well as all of this integration that we're discussing right now. So I think it's another nuance of our small district, perhaps, as well. But not that it doesn't need to happen. I agree completely, B.
It sounds like we're talking about 2 related but sort of different circumstances. One being a place for us to engage the community, or for teachers to engage one another for the purposes of sort of general growth, and then another being, you know, sort of the more specific. We have an issue, we are detecting an issue, and we want to raise the flag here, and making sure that, you know, certainly for the process that we're talking about, I think we've talked about community forums and we've talked about all of that, but I think in the other situation, it's defining a very clear set of processes that make sure that this gets put in front of the right people, put in front of people who are going to help to make sure that the conversation is sort of productive and, you know, ensures that, you know, we have fairness prevailing for our students.
Maybe for the next meeting, could we hear from the administrators, like, what is the process right now? Like, what happens if a parent says they have an issue like this? Who do they go to? Or I know, you know, there's been instances where a student is treated in a way that they should never have been treated. And what is the process? and then we can, as a group, examine where the gaps are in that from all the various perspectives of this group, and how we might better make that something that's accessible and understandable to everyone. Because I don't know, I you know, obviously as a person of privilege, I would not, I don't know who I would go to. I don't know it. Like, I know if my child is bullied, I know that there's a place on the website I can go and I can fill out a form. I know who to talk to, but I don't know about these other things. So I think that maybe, how does everyone feel if we dig into that a little bit at the next meeting? Cheryl?
I think that's a great idea. I'll just make just two general comments. I think in order for anybody who is willing to have an honest discussion about differences or diversity or how they feel marginalized or how they don't feel marginalized or don't see that, you have to come from a place of trust where you feel comfortable sharing with whoever, right? So it has to be, I think, small groups. We start with small groups. It as much as we need to provide transparency I think we have to start with kind of private groups to the extent we're permitted to do so to just listen. And I think the listening has to come from a baseline, meaning there has to be some consistency of what is discussed in those groups. And I think, Heather, your documentation is probably a good way to do that. But I think also there should be some consistency in who's listening. So for example, and I do support a cross section because I think maybe we do this in tiers because, you know, you might have only parents want to talk to parents, only students want to talk to students, only educators want to talk to educators. But at some point, we have to find the time where we have to have the uncomfortable conversations because we're never going to get past what our perceived biases are until we actually get in a room and say, well, I don't see it that way. But most people are not ready to talk about that in that way right from the get-go. So we have to have I think anyway, you have to have a tiered way to do this, and it has to be consistent throughout. And I think as far as what B said about measurements or just measuring progress, completely support that. I come from a corporate environment too, and there's a way you can do that without dehumanizing it. And I think it's maybe we consider like baselining the survey. So the survey that comes out, I think we initially said we wanted the survey to have the survey before we have the focus groups, so the focus groups aren't all over the place. But I think we could probably do it concurrently and have probably survey one, and then 6 months or a year from now have another survey, so then we can measure that progress. And even though it's a different population, at least we get a sense of, yeah, if we had that focus group 6 months ago, it did work or it didn't work, or yeah, we had this in this class, it didn't work or did work. And you know, you could identify the perceptions there. So there's a way I think we can do that as long as we stay consistent and we have people actively listening that can carry that listening into subsequent groups or activities.
Okay, so I don't want this meeting to go on for all night, but I want to know, like, are we ready to say, like, we're going to go forward with these listening sessions? And then how are we going to set that up, and who's going to participate? Is that something that happens, you know, on email, or I'm looking for.
Heather, can I just?
Yeah.
It seems that we've been talking about a few different things here. Yeah. So I was really struck by what Beatrix was saying earlier and talking about the safe space. And to me, that means that there needs to be more professional learning. And that's something that we already acknowledge. And that's why our budget proposal includes funding in this area, because I think that we could go through and explain the process that we follow and the policies that apply when someone raises a concern. But I don't think that's necessarily the question here. I think we're really talking about how are we responsive in a way that shows that we are listening, that we are care, and also that we're knowledgeable enough to address the issue at hand. And I think that's where we really need to grow. So I think that there's sort of a professional learning conversation, and I say professional because that's my world, but learning also for parents and for community members. And then the other part of the conversation, when you're talking about listening and forming these listening groups, I think it's exciting to talk about mixed groups. I think it might feel less safe to people. And I'm thinking about what Kelly said in particular. I think that many teachers might feel uncomfortable in a conversation with a parent or a student, or just in terms of their ability to feel completely honest and open. So I think we need to talk a little bit more about what those listening groups might entail, and then how they would be facilitated, if at all. How would we structure the conversation so that, going back to the idea of people feeling safe and comfortable, that we can reach our goal? What are we trying to accomplish? And I think you laid that out initially, and that makes great sense, that everyone feels as if they have a voice and that it's not one way, but there can be some kind of exchange. But how can we structure it to reach that goal?
I think that the question of the staff is a different question. That I hear you about the professional learning, and I completely respect why a teacher might not feel it's a safe space when there's parents there or students. So I think taking that piece out of it for now, and letting the schools, the staff in the schools, figure out how that's going to happen and what needs to happen in order for those conversations to take place, because I do think that they should take place. And I actually would hope that they would be like required. But in terms of like the rest of us, I'm not so sure that we can't start this. I'm waiting for someone to say something. Beatrix, you have your hand up again.
I just wanted to follow up on what Stephanie said. Yes, professional development, absolutely. But I think I just want to, and I'm all for that. What I'm talking about, in addition to having, talks with, other groups to say, how are we doing? When I was talking about the safe space, it's professional development falls into the lump of what we know. But as has been said at a couple of these meetings, you don't know what you don't know. And what I'm talking about is having a safe space to talk about what you don't know when you run into it. Okay, so whether like a teacher not understanding why something would be offensive to me, that doesn't make them a bad person. That's a teacher who is running into a situation they don't know. How now do I make my children feel safe in that classroom without penalizing that teacher, but it's in my best interest to get them to a safe space to know what they don't know? And you can't anticipate all of that in professional development. These are the things, what I'm talking about are the day-to-day interactions where everyone wants everything to go great, but you don't know what you don't know. And all of a sudden something happens, and now a parent is upset, a child is upset. And like I said, I haven't experienced it, but I know others who have. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but I'm just saying, like, and these are things where a conversation in a safe space would accomplish so much. I'll just leave it at that.
So Beatrix, if I could jump in, and I want to take my superintendent hat off for a second and put my parent hat on, because I have experienced it a number of times with my children. And I was very fortunate with my older sons to be in a school where I knew that there were multiple staff members of color, for instance. So if I was working through a situation where one of my children felt uncomfortable about a situation around race, even if I wasn't confident that in that moment that the teacher would fully understand that there was somebody else in the building that I felt like that I could go to and say, can you help facilitate this conversation with
Yes,
with me and the teacher, right? That standpoint.
that's it.
So I get that's what you're talking about. The challenge, and let's call it what it is. Our challenge here is that we don't have that level of diversity, and so it's not that we can't overcome that, but we have to create some space. And we're calling it professional learning, right? Because we don't really have another way to call it. We actually did this today in our administrative council meeting. So with all of the administrators, we actually took a recent scenario and really unpacked it with the detail level and talked about the multiple perspectives that people would be coming to the table and kind of unpacking how they think through this and what might be a way that you would respond that could easily be well-intentioned but send the wrong message. And so we called it, I mean, it was PD. I ended up calling it like story time, right? Because there is something, and when you read a lot of equity research, there is really something about the storytelling, which is the benefit of these kind of open listening sessions, right? That you're just listening to hear other people's stories, right? So hearing your story about how much that week impacted you, impacted everyone up here, right? And so whereas, other people in on the call tonight would have said like, oh yeah, my kid enjoyed that too. It now took a different meaning hearing your story. And so the benefit of this process is to create that space. Part of what I envision as what we're calling professional learning is creating some space for our administrators and then for our teachers as well to do some of that same kind of reflective work and being able to anticipate that. That's a long process. I've given this issue a lot of thought, not as superintendent, but just as a person and thinking about what something like this could look like. I have some really specific ideas that I don't want to go public with yet. I'd love to just run some thoughts by you sort of offline, just to get to see if this is, what do you think about this as a way? So there's a network of colleagues that I have sort of around the country, and we've been talking through this and what something like this could look like, and could potentially be really impactful in communities like ours, where you don't always have as much diversity. And look, we're having to do that in really meaningful ways, particularly when we're talking about some of the issues we talked about tonight with students who are identifying as trans. We may not have teachers who identify as trans and staff, so they need some special training or some special understanding to be able to bridge the gap and really better interpret how kids might be experiencing their surroundings and know how to intervene, and also identifying some champions in each of our schools who could be sort of the go-to person if you're having some issues with this, while we're also building capacity across the entire community. So just know that I'm also thinking a lot about that, and it's something that I think is for me is a very much personally and beyond professionally, but personally invested in seeing what that looks like.
Thank you.
So again, like, is this something that we organize now? Do we?
Yeah, I don't know what the sort of specific sort of conversations look like and how we somehow officially sponsor them. I also don't know how we, I don't know that we would necessarily have to go back to the boards to sponsor those. We're a sort of independent entity, and I'd look to Chris to to give me guidance there. But I think we are perfectly within our rights to say, we would love for a member of this group, or, you know, 2 members, we can't get quorum if otherwise then it's, you know, publicly noticed and all that stuff, but some collection of members of this group to sponsor a series of
We
conversations.
had, the Reading Board of Education had a series of listening sessions a couple of years ago where we went like to Meadow Ridge, we went to the library, and it was just an informal thing where there were board members there and people could ask us questions and we could answer. I think one way we could organize this so that this conversation has some forward momentum and not just spinning around is that if each individual board takes on the idea of putting together one of these sessions. So you would have like the Reading board members with the Reading parents and Reading students, Easton and Region 9, just putting the word out, talking to the PTA, talking to people, saying like these conversations are going to be happening. Let us know, you know, if so I would put it to the board members to organize that for your community. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think it does. Do we want to sort of resolve on some kind of the motion to sort of approve that as a committee, or do we want to say this is just something we're doing?
I don't think we need to. Chris, what do you think?
It doesn't feel like it would require action. It's not approving a policy or expenditure or anything like that. It's telling people to go and talk to people.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk to
And
people,
to
Chris.
listen to people.
Yeah, I think
talking.
I guess I would have a question about what sort of the parameters are around this with respect to who all is being asked to reach out to who, through what modes of communication are they doing that? Is that through school listservs? Is that through social media? Is that through word of mouth? What's the capacity limit? Because it's a different conversation with 4 people than it was 45 people.
Yeah.
All of those things sort of flow from the concept.
I took a lot away from what Cheryl had to say with relation to sort of start with small groups, build trust, you know, sort of have those small group conversations. I think, you know, 4 to 6, maybe 8 people would be the max that I would think, like if I were sort of having a conversation with folks, that would be my target.
But so we have, depending on the response, you know, you could get hundreds of people that want to do this. We could get 5.
Yep.
Depending on the response, you know, we do have that training from CABE and the guidance from CABE that if there are, you know, there's three board members from each board, that could be 3 different groups with the, you know, each one including also like community member, staff member, who wants to be involved, students, right?
Yep.
And maybe the student, we can talk about that, how this, I don't know if maybe students would not want to participate, would feel more comfortable just being in a student group.
Yeah, I think for sure, if we're talking about students, you know, I think a member of the administration would need to be a part of that conversation, as opposed to just board members.
I nominate Dr. Harrison.
Seconded. Any discussion? No, passed. Okay, good.
Okay, and it's going to have a musical interlude.
But the threshold question is still, to whom are you marketing this and how?
Yeah.
Right. So ideas, I would think listserv, and also, I mean, we don't have a newspaper or anything like that. Do we want to just start with the school community first? I don't know. Like
when do
put it
we
out
plan?
there.
I mean, when are we hoping to get the survey out?
Well, as soon as it can be approved by the boards.
I wonder if we could reference a sort of central email for people to indicate their interest in participating in sessions. I mean, at a minimum, it's good to collect that information, even if it's not immediately valuable.
Right. So in the introduction to the surveys, it could say, or at the end,
right,
if you would like to participate, email this.
Right.
Okay.
Would we happen to have that website, which, by the way, Dr. Harrison's awesome, looked great. Would we be able to have that ready in conjunction with the survey and or the outreach via listserv to participate in these listening groups?
Yes.
Yes, please. Yeah,
Yep.
and like the email address there, the listening, that'd be great.
And then that could be the official communication or portal, so to speak, of all DEI activities that originate from this task force, right? So that there's no confusion as to your point, Dr. Harrison, about communication. There's no confusion as to the purpose of this committee and this task force and what the objectives are, et cetera.
How do we take the information that we get from these? I'm seeing, multiple sessions, multiple conversations. Does it stay within that, or how do we pull that back into this committee and take actions as necessary?
CAPE has guidance on that. CAPE has like forms that you would fill out. They have a whole. If you look at it, it's like a 30-page toolkit, and they have like here are some questions to structure the conversation. And they have like a form that you fill out, like here, and each person who's there has a form to fill out on their takeaways from it and stuff like that. I'll send that around to everybody because it's really interesting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so are we good to go with that then? Yeah, moving on.
And just for clarity, the anticipated approval date or discussion on the survey would be the next scheduled tri-board, which is May. Unless we accelerated that.
Unless every board could do it separately.
Independently.
In theory, it could be done independently. I think that leaves a lot of room for mismatching motions and different boards attaching different qualifications to things that might create more friction than we'd want. But we can talk offline about whether we want to try to schedule a meeting sooner than that.
Well, but for the DEI website, Dr. Harrison, that could go live way before the survey goes, yeah? So we could advertise, obviously, I would assume there's going to be some kind of advertisement for that website when it launches. And a part of that could be, there is this email address you can send to if you're interested in being a part of a listening session or a conversation, whatever we want to call it. And that could be a major mechanism, probably the primary mechanism for us to collect names to sort of invite to these sessions.
I'd actually prefer, I can't speak for my 7 other colleagues on the Region 9, but I would prefer that we have this discussion or move this forward as in the tri-board agenda, so that there is uniformity, and if there isn't, we'll know. And then we can move the same way, in the same speed,
for
and
the survey.
put the same timeline associated with the survey, and then just really, I think, just communicate the website, so then whatever we're doing on behalf of each district, it can be uniformly heard by each of the 21 board members, and then they can choose or not choose to engage, and then whatever informal conversations, and then those on the task force, we can then carry the torch, so to speak, on trying to organize these listening groups.
Yeah.
So I had a thought, just kind of going back to Cheryl, something that you said about establishing trust. And I wonder if there would be an opportunity for people to sign up for like 3 consecutive sessions where you can get back together with the same people and continue the conversation. And we might run sort of a spring session of this, and then we think about there might be an opportunity to do something, to do it again in the fall, or that there's something about, so even this group of us together, our conversations now are very different than they were at our first task force meeting in the personal sharing, right? So I think that even with this committee, in a public meeting that's recorded, there's been a level of establishing trust and getting to know people so that you could, let me lean in and see what Kelly's going to say about this. There's a benefit to getting people together again, because I think that there's 2 purposes of it, right? There's one, I think, is the obvious, us lifting out information to get a better sense of sort of where we are and what the needs are in the community and what some of the thoughts are. But I feel like there's also the opportunity of creating the connections and sort of living out the whole concept of what we're talking about with recognizing and celebrating diversity of people. And so I just want to think about it from that perspective as well.
I was sort of imagining that's how I was anticipating it would work without requiring people to sign up for, you're going to be committing yourself to 5 months with these same 5 people or whatever. But I was anticipating that it would be multiple conversations with the same groups. Obviously it's people have this is all by choice, right? So, but I do think that I completely agree with what you're saying. And that when you start establishing trust with someone, that you don't have to have the same initial conversation every time you get together.
Yeah, and I'm especially sensitive to that for many of our people who would be coming representing marginalized identities, having to start over again, and working through the potential of, because the trusting piece there is, like somebody might say something crazy, or somebody might say something that could be experienced as a microaggression. And if I'm going to expose myself to that kind of vulnerability, kind of going back to the public comment about Brene Brown, if I'm going to be vulnerable in that moment, I don't want to have to keep doing it with a new group of people every time. Like that's a really big ask. And I think that oftentimes when we're thinking about this work, we forget about the level of risk that some members of our community are experiencing just by being willing to participate. And it is very much a place of privilege to not have to be worried about those those microaggressions. And so if we could, I just felt like we have to do right by our people in the community and think about ways to protect against that. And there's always going to be risk, right, when you're vulnerable with people that you don't necessarily know. But if we can do it in a way where at least you could build some forward momentum, and I think there's a possibility there. And because of that, I really could see us being intentionally small in sort of building this up. I think it could be that this process of doing this could very much be a part of who we are as ER9. And 5 years from now, this is something that we just do because it's healthy for our community. That's it. I'm off my soapbox.
Dana has her hand up.
Kind of going with the same thing we talked about, mixed groups, and just talking about the vulnerability coming from a teacher standpoint, and even just being in the buildings and just teacher welfare right now. I think we have to be careful on, we want them to volunteer and participate, that maybe we do have the option of some groups that are just teachers if you really want feedback right now. I think they're kind of hanging on as tight as we can. So if you want participation, I think it's got to be as safe as possible right now.
Yeah, I think maybe the teachers can discuss organizing that in their schools with the administrators. Because I would imagine there would be people that would want to participate in this, and then probably, if they hear from other people that did it, maybe if they were hesitant and they're like, no, it was actually really great, I learned a lot, it was, maybe they would do the next one. But I would leave that, so the board members will go and work with getting the school parent community, and then the teachers and staff can work with the administrators to put those together. Yeah? Does that make sense? Devin?
I do think it would also just be helpful to think through kind of what, like the goal of multiple sessions and potentially how does that build, like how do you build trust in the first one? What information needs to be shared in order for folks to react and respond? And like, what is that conversation about? Or what are, like, we're listening for feedback about what kinds of things, like, are we presenting what DEI work is or what we're doing in the building so people have a common understanding? Just trying to think through, I love the idea of multiple sessions, of building community with like the same group and that same kind of conversation and having opportunities to listen and share feedback and build and grow. But are we like, just kind of thinking through like the arc of what those sessions look like? Are we reading and responding to something? Would that be beneficial? Are we sharing information? So it's like we're listening about certain topics. Is the goal to like build capacity in certain DEI skill sets? Just
I think that just like when we were at the very beginning of this talking about focus groups, the people that are going to be organizing or like sort of chairing these little groups, like the point person, we can have a training session where we work out exactly how to do that in a way that's equitable and inclusive and follows guidelines so that we're being very safe and protective and taking care of our people, and also getting at the kind of information that we're looking for. I wonder if CABE actually could do that for us.
But
yeah,
I think they could.
Okay.
I think they charge for it, but we can look into that and see what's available.
Okay.
Yeah, I think training for facilitators would be.
Yeah, facilitators. That's the word I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, I led hundreds of focus groups last year. I am not ready to lead a single focus group on this topic yet. I would want to ride shotgun with Dr. Harrison for a lot of conversations and learn how it's really done and get training and all of that.
All right. Okay, so are we moving on? Yes? So the plan is that we are going to reach out to CABE, get some training for facilitating these. We're going to set up these through the administrators. And then is the plan to have this begin before our next meeting? Yeah, that's a month from now.
That feels awfully aggressive with a week of spring break in the middle of it too.
Okay, or maybe the training and the setting it all up can happen before the next meeting.
Yeah, and I could imagine in the next meeting we're presenting back, structure about, the various audiences, the different types of, sort of focus group sessions, and that could take place. That gives us a very clear picture of sort of next.
Maybe
steps.
we've also collected some emails from people that say they want to participate, and then we can be dividing into groups and say who's in which group. Okay. So moving on, this takes us into the discussion of the equity statement, which Dr. Harrison talked about before, which is a really important sort of foundational piece for our schools that they can point to and say, this is part of our foundational beliefs and our mission. Just like in Reading, we spent a long time building our vision, mission, and purpose. And so every decision that we make, we measure it against the vision, mission, and purpose. Is this fulfilling what we're here to do? So Dr. Harrison, did you want to talk about some equity statements? You're muted. Okay.
Yep, here we go. So I have just a short slideshow. So the idea here, and I think Heather really hit the nail on the head here, is crafting a tri-district equity statement. So recently I did a board presentation in Easton and shared an article with the Easton Courier, and then did sort of a repeat of this today, working with our administrators and really digging into what's our why? What's the why of DEI? Why do we believe this work is the right work to do? And we talked about a number of reasons, and looked at some sort of patterns that we could see in some of our earlier data, and connecting to some work that we've already started as the three districts. But the piece that's missing is when we're having to make tough decisions or make bold decisions or really unpack a difficult situation, that we don't right now have anything that we could turn to from a policy standpoint. And so for us as educators, that is such a crucial piece. You know, if someone were to ask me, you know, well, how come this discipline decision was made about students? I could immediately go back to our board's policy and say, you know, there's a policy on progressive discipline that says, here's the board's philosophy on what we think about discipline, and that informs our actions going forward from there. And so you want to have some kind of equity statement, and it doesn't have to be lengthy like a policy, but just something that says, here's why this is important. Just in looking at creating this statement, I wanted to just highlight a few area districts that have already done this work. So we mentioned earlier working with the Center for School Change. There are some consultants we're working with at the high school. So they've done this work in some districts around the state. This is one of them from Granby. And so they developed an equity statement and their equity team mission. I don't have to read aloud to you, so I'll let you I'll be quiet and let you take a moment to read it. Was that too fast? Oops, sorry. So that's Granby's work. The next comes from Meriden Public Schools. The next is from Farmington. Farmington, of many of the districts that, and I get to work with these superintendents a lot. We've been, as a superintendent group across the state, and then in smaller pockets, have been doing a lot of focused work around equity. Farmington has been doing this work for a number of years. And so for me, working with that superintendent, we've had a lot of discussions about what are some of the lessons that they learned along the way, even in doing this work. And I've tried to, and we all talk about, you know, what have been our pitfalls, what would you do differently? So we're trying to learn from those pieces. And so it's nice to see them, you know, several years into this work, and they focus around equity matters. And this is connected, you can see it on their district site. Equity matters, instruction matters, social emotional learning matters, and all of these things that matters then have a statement that really guides their work. So I'll shut up so you can read it. So if you look at the statements that we've seen so far, and there are a lot around the state, I just pulled just a few. There are some districts I know that they're sort of where we are in the process of developing them, and so I didn't want to share ones that were sort of still in progress. And then, you know, you could spend a few minutes on Google, and there are some great ones around the country. I was able to participate in a previous district where I worked in North Carolina with developing a pretty lengthy equity statement, value statements, beliefs, and then a multiple page equity plan for a pretty large district. But the things that we see that are pretty consistent are these three components. So there's some kind of definition. So what do we mean by equity in ER9? This kind of takes us back to our first meeting when we sort of unpacked equity and diversity and inclusion. And by the way, typically we look at this as an equity statement, but for us, it could be a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. I mean, that would be appropriate as well. So what do we mean by equity or in ER9? Then what are our core beliefs? So what are those kind of important ideas and beliefs that we hold onto that we want to name what those beliefs are? And then the stance, and this is the most important part. So what are we committing to based upon these beliefs? Because the equity statement is to move us to action, right? So that it's not just aspirational, but because we believe these things, then we're committed to ensuring all students, right? And you could see sort of that pattern in some of the previous statements that I showed. And so I'll stop sharing there. And basically that is just sort of an overview of that process. And, you know, it's important to note, you know, give me a couple of hours and a cup of coffee and I can have you one ready and you know, by midnight. But that's not how it works, right? It really requires the discussion and people really digging in, because the equity statement, it's not about one person or one board. It's really, and the purpose of it being adopted by the tri-boards as a recommendation or a recommendation to the tri-boards is that we really do want it to guide all of the work that we're doing in the way that a mission or vision statement would as well. And so I know that we had some discussion coming into tonight's meeting about, you know, we saw success with having the smaller group work on developing the survey questions. And that might be a good opportunity, again, for some small group work to start working on crafting this. But Heather, I know you wanted to mention some things before that.
I did.
Well, maybe that we were going to generate, we were going to generate some ideas tonight.
Did you want to do that now?
Sure.
Okay, so should I open up I don't know what I have on here. If we wanted to sort of brainstorm some ideas of,
and maybe a way to just sort of pull out the ideas. So as you were reading those, sort of what resonated for you. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got should I share my screen now so everyone can see? And I'll try not to be a horrible typist. Okay, stage fright. Okay, one thing that I really liked in Farmington's was it gave them room for like,
I think Heather froze. I don't think that was a dramatic pause. I thought it was a dramatic pause for a while, and then I'm like,
really dramatic.
Froze. I'm like, I am waiting. Okay. Right, Elle, is it possible to get all the language onto one page?
I'm working on it.
I could hear the clicks. I'm like, I bet he's putting it all on one page.
Yeah, they had a power outage, so they're back.
Oh no. Okay. I really liked I actually liked the first one from, what was it? Sorry, I'm sorry that I'm
Granby.
forgetting the name of the Granby. Yeah. But what I liked about it was that it was very sort of plain spoken, and it didn't actually have like sort of flowery words. It was more just like, it is right to do this and this and this, and this is why we believe this. And like, there was something about that I liked in terms of getting everybody in town on board with that. Like, there's nothing there. Like, I know that we are not trying to get everybody to change their hearts overnight, but there are people who say, I don't know that diversity is our strength. Like, all right, settle down. If we say it this way, like, there's no way that you can disagree with, the statement in the Granby one. It's just like, come on, these are truths we are holding self-evident. Come on. So that I like that about that one, but that's just my take.
Are you going to show them up one more time, Liddell?
Yep,
Is that what you're doing right now? Okay, I thought that's what you're doing. Yeah, I do. I can't remember which one it was, but I'd like, just as we think about the meaning of equity and making sure we put students kind of at the center and focusing on meeting their unique needs, right? That's about meeting students' needs and making sure that we're keeping that at the center of the educational work and the instructional work that is happening.
Can everyone see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing I like on the Farmington one is that we start by, we recognize that students come to us with the diverse experiences, interests, and needs. So it's just putting that part out there.
One thing I don't like about the Granby one, ensures practices that allow, like, you try to ensure practices that allow students to, but like, this almost makes it sound like it's done. Like, yep, we do that. We have achieved that perfectly.
Right. Might say strives to or endeavors to.
Exactly.
I'll say I was definitely more drawn to the one from Granby. I thought the fact that they actually said not predicated by race, religion, ethnicity, I think to a lot of parents to actually have those things as part of your statement is very important. And that when I thought it was very interesting that Farmington, who's been doing this for a while, did not specify those in theirs.
Yep. And interesting, Beatrice, that you pick up on that. I think Farmington has other documents that go along with this. And I feel like it's more explicit there. And when I was doing this work in Chapel Hill, one of the things that was really important in the community was that we named it.
Absolutely
said the things, and I can't tell. I actually was going to include it here. It's just so long, and the part of it is because the list is so long. I mean, it was very inclusive. I mean, and so it really did, because it was named, it was clear that these are actually priorities.
Right.
The one thing that I don't know if I missed this when for some reason my power keeps going out, but there was one of them that said something about like in all the ways that people are different, so that you wouldn't, if there was something that was left out that you didn't realize was left out, 3 years from now, there's something in there that allows for the expansion besides what's listed. Does that make sense?
Like, for instance, ableness is not listed in the Granby statement, et cetera. Yeah.
But I do like that the Farmington statement ends that diversity is an asset to our school community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'd like in the Meriden one, and this maybe was already said, it's just the recognition of both unconscious and conscious in both systemic and individual biases and like the impact on that.
Yeah, Devin, I would agree with you there because that would address what probably I would guess happens more often than anything else is microaggressions of which people are not necessarily aware. And even those perhaps who may be receiving that. So particularly when you're young and you just want to fit, you just want to fit in, you want to look like the other kids, you want to have, so you may not even know it's a microaggression, and to actually have a statement that would address biases that we all have would be helpful.
I'm just gonna plop the Chapel Hill one in here.
I like the idea of beginning that diversity is an asset to our community.
Yep.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the first paragraph from Chapel Hill.
Wow.
That's very good. Find, replace Chapel Hill.
Yeah. Wow.
There's your diverse language fluency.
Yeah. And really, that is paragraph 1 of 5 on page 1 of 22.
I really like the words, the phrase barrier free, and that just like thinking about what that, like that move from equity to justice, right? And that you're removing barriers for all different groups of students.
Yep.
I do like that, like where it says the contemporary and historical impact of bias, prejudice, and discrimination. I do like the idea of including the unconscious bias also.
So if I could stop sharing that, and I just want to share this is the bigger part of the statement, and a lot of time was spent on the value statements, which I would argue make this a really standout plan. But of course, speaking of bias, right? I'm a little biased.
Whoever worked on this, we got to get them.
I like those value statements spelled out like that. Just real straightforward.
Not resign them to negative outcomes.
Yes.
I like that it says will not resign them. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how long did it take for the community to construct this?
So I would say start to finish, the entire plan. Well, so I would say this part probably about 6 months. But but to be honest, Cheryl, 3 of the months we were sort of circling. And so I just kind of had to hit the gas pedal and say, you know, we're going to wordsmith for forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I asked, because I would suspect that, I mean, I completely support your point about just moving forward, is just to get something on a piece of paper, and it's not going to be perfect and we could edit this forever.
Yep.
But to move forward, and I think what's going to happen, or I would hope what's going to happen, is that if we start with this or any other document, that ultimately the input from the community will make this more personalized to both towns, and that's exactly what I would hope we would strive for, that outcome, right? But I think this is a good place to start personally.
I wonder about the benefits of drafting something that isn't sort of final or perfect, but is sort of a draft that can be socialized in the communities. And to the extent you're looking for feedback sessions or other things, say, this is the draft. What does this mean to you? Where does it hit the mark? Where does it not hit the mark? And then use that as feedback to get it to something that's closer to done.
So we're looking for a group, a smaller group to work on this, creating the initial, what Chris just suggested, the sort of springboard. Yeah.
The vision statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the idea was that we would kind of come up with some things tonight, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we as a group wanted to include, sort of like we did, was it the curriculum committee did over the summer?
Yes. I think that was July.
Yeah. Do we want to just make a list right now? People can put some things that they want to include in that, like in you know, what are our values? What do we? I mean,
I feel a little bit like we have such sort of good starts, and it would be very useful to sort of be able to chew on these, for me at least, for me to be able to chew on it. And I don't know if there's utility in us saying, like, who are the people who are going to sort of take away and do a little bit more homework and sort of gather their thoughts to present back maybe at our next meeting. I don't know.
Yeah, that was what was that's what we're do we have volunteers who would like to work on a working group of this vision statement? Oh my God, everybody.
We can't have quorum.
Okay, hold on.
We can't have quorum, otherwise.
Cheryl.
I mean, we could have quorum. You just have to notice all your meetings.
Darlene, who else raised their hand? Beatrix?
Yep.
Jennifer? Okay, I have Dr. Harrison, Cheryl, Dr. Pearson-Ugal, Ms. Wallen, Beatrix, and Jennifer. Was there anyone else? Chris, I saw you unmuted for a second. I know you.
I thought I saw Cheryl with her hand up. I didn't know if you.
I wrote Cheryl.
So how many members is that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's people from different boards, so it's okay.
This is all one agency.
Oh,
this.
So how many people can be?
No, less than half. But honestly, you could just notice those meetings if you want to.
Wait a second.
Right. The policy committee does
less
writing.
than half of the board members, though, right?
Less than half the voting members, or less than half?
Voting members, I thought. So the only voting member on here is Cheryl.
Okay.
Right? Devin, you didn't put your hand up, right?
I did, but I don't want to put us into a quorum challenge. So like, I'm happy to come, but I don't want to be I don't want to make it, I have to be a notice meeting and all the things. So like,
but
if there's room, I'll be there, but if not, it's okay.
If it's less than half the voting members,
right,
we could have Devin on there also.
Yeah, so it would be 2 members of each board is the voting members, and then and looks like Stephanie. If I'm looking at the charge, so I'm looking at the charge online, right? So
2 members of each board.
So that there are 6 members, and then Stephanie is an official voting member.
Seven. So then we have two people.
Right.
So if it's me, Devin, and Stephanie, it's only 3.
You have
Right.
3.
that
You're
are
good.
voting.
You're not in quorum issue. And again, like I think Chris was saying,
Yeah,
policy
that's a good idea.
does
Yeah.
drafting of language all the time. We notice every meeting. So just because you have to notice it, it's not a big deal. It's just a little
You
bit
just have
more.
to do it. Right. Remember to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's important to note this isn't an effort to hide the work. It's just a function
Yeah.
of doing the writing and the drafting being a sort of nitty-gritty task.
Right. And being able to sort of jump on a Saturday and sort of do some work. And then, ultimately everything comes back to this forum, which will always be public.
Right.
Okay, so we got our working group. So I can connect everybody off Zoom for that. I'm really excited. I'm really excited about that. We can maybe have T-shirts made up. We can sell merch with our vision statement. We can sell merch that supports the DEI work.
It have to be very big T-shirts.
I was like very short.
Yeah.
Like those pocket constitutions that people. Okay, so moving on to public comment. Do we have members of the public here who would like to make a comment? I saw a hand. Where did it go? Morna.
Hi. I've
Wait, you have to
enjoyed.
tell me your name and your address. What street you live on?
Okay, Morna Christmore is my name. Address is 149 Gallows Hill Road in Reading, Connecticut.
Yes.
So I've just enjoyed listening to you all. And I don't have anything of real substance to say, but I did want to comment on you changed one of the things on your questionnaire or survey or whatever it is you call it to neutral / what was it? I don't know. Was that it? And I just want to point out those are really 2 different answers, and you're clumping them together. So what good is it going to do you when you want to analyze what people say? Because there is a difference between I feel totally neutral about this versus I don't even know what you're talking about. That's all.
Good point.
Thanks.
Okay, Dana Benson.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Dana Benson, 34 Pond Road, Easton. I compared your 30-page questionnaire that you proposed to use for the middle school to the 2019 7-page school climate survey that was previously used. The first thing I noticed was how much smaller the old survey was from the new survey. The second thing is I was struck by how biased towards LGBTQ+ issues the new survey is. And I realized that's because the survey came from GLSEN, I think, an LGBTQ advocacy organization. So I think question number 29, which reads, regarding those I can turn to for help, at least one of these adults and I share a common race, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, other, please specify. Do not have these things in common, not sure. I think that question should be dropped. I think this question highlights one of the several underlying assumptions of social justice, critical race theory, and intersectionality with which I disagree. Because underlying question 29, at least in my interpretation, is the idea that you can only understand somebody if you share their race, sexual orientation, or gender. And my view is that we are people first, and we should be teaching our children that they are people first, and teaching them skills to understand each other, and that they can understand each other without having to share the same race or gender. I think many of the questions on your survey are biased in this direction and have little to do with education and a lot to do with indoctrination. For example, questions 21 and 22, I think also should be dropped. Why should there be opportunities in class to talk about gender and gender identity? Why should there be opportunities in class to talk about sexual orientation? I believe that these subjects are subjects to be discussed between parents and children, and the schools are there to teach the children math, history, literature, and science. From the 2019 survey, I actually like question 15. This is from the old school climate survey. It's simple, clear, and direct. It is not ideological, and it does not lead students towards an answer. The question reads, if you've been treated unfairly, please explain why. And then it leaves a blank for the student to fill it in, to write what they actually experienced as a unique, discrete, individual human being, what they felt, what they experienced, what happened to them. So those are some comments. On terms of listening groups, I think one of the important listening groups that you might want to include are people like me who have a different point of view. That's where we get diversity. We get diversity through complexity, through argumentation, and through different points of view, rather than gathering groups of people who share your point of view. So I would ask, do you plan to listen to parents and taxpayers? And they're one of the constituents on this call, which I haven't heard much about at all. So I would also suggest, if you want to get your message out and have a healthy debate, that perhaps Dr. Harrison or someone else who is an advocate of diversity, for lack of a better word, social justice, critical race theory, intersectionality, the other elements that make up this point of view, which starts from the premise that there is a problem in Easton and there's a problem in Easton schools, could perhaps debate another advocate on a public Zoom call that's open to everybody in Reading and Easton or anybody else about these issues. And I don't know who that person on the other side would be, but I would suggest that would be great. Other than that, thank you for all the time you've put into this. I don't agree with everything you're doing, but I respect the commitment to improving the town from your point of view and from your vision.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in our listening sessions. Sarah Odell.
Hi, thank you. Sarah Odell, 214 Black Rock Turnpike in Reading. So 2 points. I wanted to address, first of all, the interesting idea that the person who spoke previously brought up. I would just like to say, from the perspective of another community member, that I would not support debating whether issues of people's humanity, it's really not up for debate. So, and the second point, I would like to thank again the task force, as I did last month, for doing this work. And I would like to also thank you specifically for addressing issues of LGBTQ students and families in our community. As somebody who actually does have kids in the schools and who is pretty connected with the schools through my 2 children, I am glad to see this work being done. It is something that my kindergartner and my 4th grader have conversations about. They understand these things, they know about them. There are kids in their orbit who they know who have different gender identities, and I am really glad to see this be a vital part of this conversation, along with the other things like diversity surrounding disability and race and neurodiversity and all these other important topics. So thank you again for making sure that's included.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public want to make a comment? Okay, any task force member comment?
Thank you to all the task members and members of the public. That's all.
Yeah, thank you for everyone. I'm sorry about all the technical trouble that we had. Wait, Beatrix.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the point that was brought up in terms of going from neutral to don't know. We did agree earlier to include both of those in there in the surveys. And we're going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that those questions do include the don't know option without excluding the neutral.
Chris Parkin.
Just wanted to point out with respect to the school climate survey, that's a statutorily required survey that's administered irrespective of this DEI survey, which is a different instrument altogether.
Any other task force member comment? Yes, Dr. Harrison.
So I just want to say that I know we spent a good amount of time talking tonight about these listening sessions going forward, which I think it's a great idea. I do want to just take a moment to just point out that I am always open for listening, regardless of if it's a planned session. So I would always welcome any members of the community to just reach out to me via email and set up a time. And we could do a virtual coffee chat, whatever that looks like, and just talk, because I do think that to do this work and to do it well in a meaningful way, I do think that it is important that we get a clear picture of many different perspectives. And I've worked hard to try to apply multiple lenses to everything that I do in making decisions on behalf of our students. But it wouldn't hurt to have another lens so if I could, I think I would grow and benefit from more of that one-on-one engagement with folks. And Mr. Benson, you could expect an email from me, because I'd love to set something up for us to have some conversation.
Okay, is there any other, I don't know if you can everybody hear me? My power went out again and I'm on my
Yes,
phone.
we can.
Okay, is there any other task force member comment? Beatrix, is your hand still up because you didn't put it down? Okay. Scrolling through, okay, I don't see anybody. So I just want to thank everybody again for all of their hard work on this, and for the time and the consideration and the care that everyone's taking in all these conversations. And I want to reiterate, I throw my hat in also with Dr. Harrison, that I'm always willing to listen to anybody. And I think that we took feedback.
Not a dramatic pause.
No. Can I make a motion to adjourn? Or no, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Actually, it actually is, would be more appropriate if you took it, John.
Yeah, okay. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Devin? Good.
Okay. Seeing no opposition, we'll adjourn at 9:35. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.